Welcome back to Reader's Revival, a podcast that makes classic literature easy to understand and relevant to modern life. I'm your host, Kalea Simpson, and each episode we break down well-known stories, explain what they're really about, and we connect them to psychology, culture, and everyday experiences. No dense language, no homework, just engaging explanations that help you understand why these stories still matter today. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of this podcast. It's a show where we take classic books off the boring school reading list and make them interesting again. Today, we're diving into the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I'm especially excited because this episode goes deeper than just a good guy, bad guy in one body. We're talking about identity, morality, repression, and my favorite part, the psychological concept of the shadow self, which is a theory that came after this book, but it fits very perfectly. So if you've ever wondered why the story still shows up in movies, memes, and psychology classes, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. So, let's start with the basics, but also the important details people forget. This story follows Mr. Utterson, a serious lawyer, who starts noticing weird things about his friend, Dr. Henry Jekyll. Jekyll's acting sketchy. He's isolating himself, avoiding people and friends, and leaving all his money and property to a mysterious guy no one's heard of named Edward Hyde. And here's the creepy part. When people describe Hyde, they never say exactly what's wrong with him. They feel that he's wrong. For example, in the text it says that Hyde gave off a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify the point, end quote. Another character says Hyde looks, quote, pale and dwarfish, giving an impression of displeasing ugliness, end quote. How crazy is that? Hyde feels like a violation of normal humanity, like something is off at the deepest level. And when he acts, it's pure violence, pure impulse, pure instinct. It's animalistic almost. He tramples a little girl without remorse. He murders Sir Danvers Carew with ape-like fury. So what's going on? So eventually we discover the truth that Hyde and Jekyll are the same person. Jekyll is a scientist, as we know. He created a potion that lets him separate his respectable self as Dr. Jekyll from his darker impulses, which personifies as Mr. Hyde. He says, man is not truly one, but truly two. That line is going to matter a lot later when we bring in Carl Jung into this conversation, who is the one who named the shadow self theory. Jekyll wanted to be only good, but that meant hiding his flaws, impulses, frustrations, and darker desires, the parts he believed didn't fit society's expectations. So Hyde becomes the physical embodiment of everything Jekyll represses. And as we'll see, Hyde isn't just the evil twin, he is the shadow self. This book is often treated like a horror story, but it's really a psychological study. Stevenson, the author, predicted ideas that modern psychology wouldn't fully articulate until decades later. We deal with the same things today, just in different forms. For example, Instagram self versus the real self. Private impulses versus our public persona, how we want people to view us versus how we really want to act and feel. And then wanting to be seen as good, even if we're struggling, feeling like we have different versions of ourselves for different situations. I feel like we've all felt this way, and we all feel like intruders in our bodies sometimes. But Stevenson understood all of this way before Freud or Jung. This is where the novel becomes more than just a plot twist. It becomes a commentary on who we really are and how far we'll go to avoid seeing the parts of ourselves we don't like. So, with Carl Jung in the shadow self, in simple terms, Carl Jung was a 20th century Swiss psychologist who believed that every person has a shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves that we deny, reject, or don't want others to see. The shadow includes impulses, fears, anger, jealousy, shame, desires you would never speak out loud, and parts of yourself you pretend aren't there. Jung said the shadow forms because society teaches us to hide anything that isn't acceptable, so we bury it. Here's the key, though. Repressed things don't disappear, they actually grow stronger. Jung wrote that the shadow becomes dangerous when we deny it exists. It leaks out through anger, bad decisions, self-sabotage, guilt, or sudden emotional reactions we didn't mean. And Jung describes the shadow as the thing a person has no wish to be, which is exactly how Hyde is described. Jekyll embodies the public self, the respectable doctor, the charitable gentleman, the guy who wants to be admired, and Hyde is the shadow, the impulses Jekyll refuses to admit he has. Jekyll literally describes Hyde this way in the text, quote, "Edward Hyde, alone in the ranks of mankind, was pure evil," unquote. But that's not true. Hyde is not purely evil. He is Jekyll's denied evil. That's why Hyde starts out smaller physically, like a part of Jekyll that hasn't been exercised. Jekyll says, "I was conscious of no repugnance, rather of a leap of welcome," unquote. He likes becoming Hyde at first. It feels freeing, there's no consequences, and there's no guilt. This is Jung's shadow theory in action. When you finally express something you've been suppressing, it feels thrilling. But when you overindulge in the shadow, when you let it control you, it can take over. Jekyll admits, quote, "My devil had been long caged, he came out roaring," unquote. That's Jung's point exactly. If you deny the shadow, it eventually breaks free in destructive ways. Hyde gets stronger, Jekyll gets weaker. Eventually, Jekyll turns into Hyde without drinking the potion, meaning the shadow is now in control, which is Jung's nightmare scenario. Here's the incredible thing. Stevenson published the story in 1886. Jung wasn't born until 1875, so Stevenson anticipated a psychological insight decades early. We are at our most dangerous when we pretend we're only good. Hyde isn't a monster Jekyll accidentally creates. Hyde is what happens when you try to create a perfect version of yourself. Jekyll's biggest mistake isn't the potion, it's the belief that he could cut himself in half. He says, "I stood already committed to a profound duplicity of life," unquote. He was living two lives long before Hyde existed. The potion just made it physical and visible. Okay, let's walk through the full story of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I want you to feel the plot the way readers in the 1880s did, confused, curious, and honestly maybe a little creeped out. Because even though everybody today knows the twist, Stevenson originally structured the book like a mystery detective story, not a horror story. So Mr. Utterson, the man in the beginning, is a lawyer who is calm, logical, and maybe a little dull. He's the perfect character to watch strange things happen to because he reacts like a normal person. Utterson hears from his cousin, Enfield, about a disturbing encounter. A man, Edward Hyde, trampled a little girl on the street. Not accidentally, he just walked over her like she was nothing. And she's described as screaming, and her parents freak out, and they cannot find Hyde anywhere. The genius of Stevenson is Hyde's horror is instinctive, not physical. You feel something is wrong with him without knowing what quite is wrong. And then Enfield mentions something. Hyde has a key to Dr. Jekyll's laboratory, and Hyde wrote the check to pay off the family using Dr. Jekyll's name, which is crazy because why would Dr. Jekyll, their friend, be associated with a man so evil like Mr. Hyde and have access to his finances and his laboratory? So Utterson gets concerned, obviously. He knows Jekyll very well. Jekyll is respected, kind, intelligent, and charitable. He's basically the poster child for Victorian respectability. So why is he connected to a violent man like Hyde? Utterson reads Jekyll's will and finds something shocking. If Jekyll disappears or inexplicably vanishes, Hyde inherits everything. Utterson's reaction is, okay, that's suspicious. That's a murder mystery, gotta solve. He decides to investigate. So he visits Jekyll, and he finds the doctor looking sick and trying very hard to pretend everything is normal. Jekyll claims he can stop seeing Hyde whenever he wants, calling it, quote, "The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde." but his body language says otherwise. It's clear he's lying to himself as much as to Utterson. This is one of the first signs that Hyde isn't just a dangerous acquaintance, he is something Jekyll can't control. Everything gets worse when Hyde commits a murder now. The victim, Sir Danvers Carew, a gentle old man with no enemies, Hyde beats to death. Stevenson repeatedly links Hyde to something primitive and animalistic. If you'll remember earlier, they described Hyde as with ape-like fury. The public is horrified. The police drag Utterson into the case, and when they search Hyde's apartment, they find a broken walking stick, which he used to beat the old man to death, ashes from burned papers, and a sense that Hyde fled in panic. It looks like Hyde is gone and ran away. Jekyll is emotionally collapsed. He writes a letter saying he's done with Hyde forever, as if he's so ashamed of what Hyde did. For a while, things are calm. Jekyll returns to society, he hosts dinners, reconnects with friends, and acts like his old self, which he was not doing when Hyde was around. Then suddenly, Jekyll locks himself inside his laboratory again. He refuses to see anyone, he only communicates through a closed door, and his voice sounds strange, like it's more hurried. His butler, Poole, becomes terrified. He tells Utterson, "That thing in the laboratory is not my master." Poole even describes the figure he glimpsed. It was crying out like a rat, and it had a mask over its face. Again, the animalistic descriptions. This is where the book gets creepy. Stevenson builds fear through glimpses and hints, never fully showing Hyde, but very much implying. And then Utterson and Poole break down the door. Inside the laboratory, they find Hyde, but he's dead by suicide. Jekyll is nowhere. The shocking part, though, Hyde is wearing Jekyll's clothes. It looks like Jekyll has vanished, but that's when Utterson finds multiple letters and confessions left behind. These documents become the last 2 chapters of the book, and they reveal the truth. Jekyll reveals everything. So the final chapter is his complete confession, and it's one of the great horror monologues in literature. Jekyll explains that he has always felt divided in self. Quote, "I learned to recognize the thorough and primitive duality of man," unquote. He wanted to separate his good side from his bad side, thinking he could be perfect if he could just get rid of the shameful parts. But when he became Hyde, something unexpected happens. Hyde felt free. He describes Hyde as, quote, "younger, lighter, happier in body," unquote, which is the real horror. Hyde isn't a punishment, he's Jekyll's pleasure, without the guilt. But the more Jekyll transforms into Hyde, the stronger Hyde becomes. Eventually, Hyde begins to appear without the potion. Jekyll wakes up as Hyde and has no idea how long he's been out. Jekyll realizes, quote, "I was slowly losing hold of my original and better self," unquote. And that's when he knows it's over. Hyde will destroy him, and possibly others, if Jekyll lets him live. So Jekyll makes the final tragic choice to kill Hyde, but with that, it kills himself too. The book ends with Jekyll's line, quote, "I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end," unquote. So that's a synopsis of the story. And so how do we connect this to the morality of Victorian society Jekyll was in and the shadow self that Carl Jung talks about? So Jekyll tried to cut himself into good and then bad, but that's not how we work as people. He tried to amputate the parts of himself he didn't like, and that result was Hyde, his shadow, became personified. Hyde isn't a monster Jekyll created, he's the monster Jekyll unleashed. He was always there. This is why the story still feels modern. We all try to present a Jekyll version of ourselves, clean, polite, well-behaved, acceptable, just like in Victorian times. But the parts we suppress, the anger, the fear, the impulses, the desires, those don't disappear, they just linger. As Jung would say, quote, "The shadow becomes hostile only when it is ignored or misunderstood," unquote. Jekyll ignored it, so it destroyed him. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Carl Jung, and the shadow self. If you enjoyed this episode and want me to go deeper into other psychology of other classics, such as Frankenstein, which they just released a movie of, The Picture of Dorian Gray, any of those, let me know. This has been Kalea Simpson, where we make classic literature make sense. See you next time. If this episode helped you understand a story, or why someone you care about loves it, that's what Reader's Revival is all about. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow Reader's Revival on all our social media platforms for updates and bonus content. Share this episode with someone who loves books or wants to understand them better. Next time on Reader's Revival, we'll break down another classic and explore how it connects to modern culture and psychology.